It's running. All right, so if everyone is ready, do you want to? Can you hear? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So I'm Pat Clohessy. I live in Cork. I've been here 62 years, with a few trips on and off, working in the UK or in the USA when times was bad. Okay. I came here at 11 years of age. So I got into legal work because I was wrongfully sued, and I went off then, and I trained under a former judge and a barrister in the UK. It was over 4 years. So I got private tutoring. I'm qualified to the level of solicitor and barrister, but I'm not joined either the Law Society or the Bar Council, because if I was, I'd have to go along with their policies and constitutions, and this is why barristers are not doing what I'm doing, which is I'm exposing what's wrong with the system in relation to facts and documentary evidence that has been in the National Archives for the last 101 years. Okay, I found out about this through defending my mother in the court. It started in 2018, but it has gradually expanded, where I have gone through over 25,000 documents to get the evidence as to prove definitively that the three organs of the Irish state have been invalidly operating by unenforced statutes. Okay, so I wrote this declaration because people who were protesting on the 26th of April and other parts of throughout different parts of the country, I could see, their hearts are in the right place, but they have no evidence to back up what they say, which is, in other words, get out of the door. You're doing everything illegally. You're holding a rotating Taoiseach government, which is basically the same as making themselves the king under the crown. In other words, that it passes from one generation to the next. Okay? And this is not saying that I'm political. I'm not political. But what I am saying is that at the present moment, since 1963, no political parties have been lawfully registered because the Electoral Act 1963 is invalid. And why is that act invalid? That act is invalid because of the fact that in 1922, when the Free State was formed, they, in 1924, they decided that they need to have a mechanism to empower the ministers in the departments of state. There was 11 departments of state. Okay, and that mechanism was this Ministers and Secretaries Act. So on this date here, on the 3rd of May 1924, the Executive Council met and said they're going to make an order to empower the ministers and also to empower the Attorney General. So that order was to be in the format of this, which is a draft order. You can see down here at the very bottom, over here, it says, an order was made in the form of the attached draft. Okay, so this was the draft. This is on display in the National Archives in the Cabinet Minutes book. This is page 300. This is page 301. The Cabinet Minutes were from the 4th of March, 1924, up to the first volume up to the end of September or the middle of October. I don't remember the exact date, but then it goes on to volume 2. But all the cabinet minutes are on display there. So the fact of the matter is that when I first discovered this, which was on the basis of discovering that the Courts of Justice Act was a fraud. Okay, this was my first discovery. First of all, this again was a draft, the same way. In the cabinet minutes, it says, we made an order pursuant to the attached draft. This is the draft. So I went and I asked the historian in the National Archives, I said, can you tell me, do you have the original order? He said, no, what we have is here. I said, well, this is only a draft. He said, yeah, that's correct. Yeah. So I was a little taken aback because they've been using this as the foundation of the justice system, Courts of Justice Act 1924, and they've been using this as the foundation for the Departments of State and the Attorney General. So I presented about the Courts of Justice Act to the court because it had on here the seal there. So I figured, oh yeah, this must be okay, you know. But then when I went to the court, I said, well, look, it's only a draft. There has to be an original order. Where is the original order? So I wrote to the Supreme Court office and I wrote to several people. And of course, all you get is an acknowledgement, but they never deal with the substantive issue. So I started off that in 2018 in the courts, and it went on into 2019. I brought this up again in the courts, and they agreed, the Chief Justice agreed, if the act isn't commenced, it's not enforced, right? Because this is what's known as a reserve. Both of these are what's known as reserve commencement orders. So when at that time, when the king gave his assent for the bill to be passed, it was signed by the Governor General, who at that time was Timothy Michael Healy. Okay, so I have a copy of the act signed by Timothy Michael Healy for the Courts of Justice Act. I've been seeking this one since 2018, and they're not producing it. Okay. Now, so I brought this issue up in the Supreme Court, and the Chief Justice agreed with me. Yes, if the act is not commenced, it's not enforced. Well, obviously they knew. I didn't have to explain to them that when it's a reserve commencement order, there's a clause within the act that says it will be brought in to force on different days, at different times, for different purposes. That's what a reserve commencement order is. This here again in the Ministers and Secretaries Act also has a reserve commencement order. Okay, and that's what this is. In other words, it'll be brought into force different days, different times. So this is allowed in the Constitution. In other words, when the president, at the present moment, in the 1937 Constitution, when the president signs a bill, it says it will be enacted except if as otherwise indicated, meaning that it has a reserve commencement clause that it won't actually come into force even that he signs it. So there are a lot of bills that have been made acts which have been commenced by a reserved commencement order. Those bills do not, even that they are signed, they do not bring that act into force, because the only power for 101 years, since the 30th of May 1924, for any minister comes from the Ministers and Secretaries Act. But because that's not validly commenced and enforced, they are devoid of power. This goes right up through the electoral acts. It even goes into the treaties. Now, I'm just going to pause it there at the moment, and I got a little bit off the. You can just pause there. I'll start again. This is 4. That means it was